Now we're live, and it is just us. Went right into it. Didn't even have a pre-roll, nothing.
Oh, hey there. Well, I guess that makes sense. We don't have an active Kickstarter now. Thanks
Well,
to
no, I had
everyone
a
who's
pre-roll.
watching for backing.
I have one. I just didn't do it because I was
Oh,
lazy.
okay.
But
That's fine. Everybody's here. They want to hear about Baldur's Gate 3 stuff, so it makes sense.
hmm so we are going to talk all about game design tricks because I have played enough Baldur's Gate now. I'm pretty much mostly done with chapter 1, which is a good, I don't know, like 40, 50 hours I put into it. And
Wow, that's a lot. What percent would you say pretty much mostly done is? Like 80, 90%?
oh no, of chapter 1.
Yeah.
So, I'm
What do you
like,
mean by pretty much mostly
oh,
done
I
with
know.
chapter
I
one?
only need to finish up. It's one of these like you just need to polish off. There's like 3 quests, main
Ah,
quests I need
okay.
to finish up.
So it's like 90% plus of
Like
chapter one.
85%, 90, but I see where it's
And there's
going.
three main chapters, right?
Yes,
So that
yes.
means that you'll probably spend like 150 hours if they're equal length.
No, the other chapters are longer.
Oh, okay. So
So,
more than that.
yeah.
More than that.
Well,
Awesome.
I've been, I don't know if I'm going to play it again. So, what I like to do is I like to save the game and replay it with different options and see what people do and say. And this game does not have traditional branching. So, traditional, these branched RPGs usually have like say 5 options on the screen. One of the last option will get you out of it, and then there'll be like 3 options in the middle that are like story, not story, but they'll expand on what you're talking about. But then the
Like dialogue trees
yeah, dialect
or
tree. But then like the options 2, 3, and 4 will just add more content, and option 1 will get you to the next branch of the tree. But the way Baldur's Gate works is that's not how it works. Like any branch can get you anywhere at any time. So there can be 5 options, and in other games you would just go through and hit option 2, 3, and 4, and then when you're ready, hit option 1. In this game, you can hit option 4 and something else happens. Like the trees are all over the place, so you have no idea how and where they're going with these conversations. So I'm just like, damn, I gotta I'm like replaying them just to see because I'm very
interesting.
curious to see how they
So to
do
put
it.
that in context, you're saying like it'd be like option five is just like, hold on, let's not talk about this. And option one
Right.
is like, too much talk, let's go. And
Mm-hmm.
then option two would be like, oh, tell me more about this enemy base we're going to attack. Or option
Yes,
three said, what is that about the evil deity again?
that's
And
correct.
and then they basically give you more context. But
Yeah,
then
yeah,
in
that's how
this one,
BioWare does it. BioWare does it traditionally that way, and a lot of games like um and most RPGs do it that way. And it's the safer, more traditional way. Also, it's a more linear branching, but Baldur's Gate's nuts because they will change the branching. Not only I've figured it out. They'll change the branching based on what your class is, what your race is, sometimes what your sex is, who's in the party with you, and where you are in the story. I'm like, man,
so just tons of
they're
conditional flags to
insane.
try to add
Oh,
realism to the conversations.
it's really good. I mean, it's really interesting. I've never seen anyone do it to this level, which is why people, it feels incredibly personal, and that's why I think people are really connecting with it because a lot of these games feel a little, generic. But like,
Right.
there's a time like where like the conversation will change. They change the pronouns. In the conversation, they change your history, what you've been doing, and these are voiced conversations with animations. And I'm just like, damn, like this is a huge amount of work, like a ridiculous amount. And some people do that. Like there was a big controversy a couple years ago because Assassin's Creed only had a male character, and they said, well, and people wanted to have it so that you can play male or female, and they were like, well, it would be 50% more work if we made a female character because we'd have to do all the dialogue trees twice. And the answer is, yeah, you're right. It is. It is a lot of work. It's a pain. And they did it. And to be honest, not Baldur's Gate, Assassin's Creed, the one in Greece, I forgot what that one's called, Odyssey or something. Which I played that one to death, by the way. You could play the male assassin or Cassandra, the female, and the female was 1,000 times better. The voice actress was better. It was just a more interesting story, and it was well worth it. And now they're kind of doing that. And that's an old problem, because not only do they have to record all these voices in English, this game is in multiple languages, so they have to redo it in all those languages, all these choices, and then all those choices have to be translated, and it's not one-to-one English to Spanish or Russian or German, or French. It's specifically designed for that language. So we're talking an absolute ridiculously huge amount of work, and every single NPC in this game talks. Like, you're in a camp later and there's like 50 people running around. And it's not like one of those games where you click on someone and they just say something. It just pops up over their head. A lot of games do that. It's you click on them and then it cuts to cuts to one-on-one full rendered animation of them talking to you every time. And I'm like, yeah, this is why people are kind of losing their minds, because this is way too much work. And it's impressive. I mean, it's so impressive to watch. So, anyhow, for those who don't know who we are Roll for Combat. We just came out with a new book, World of Battles of Indigo Isles. It's not out yet. Kickstarter ended, feels like a year ago. It was literally 5 days ago. But you can pre-order it at battlezoo.com. It comes out in September. In fact, I just sent out all of Gold Crop to our proofers for them to proof it. And they actually already came out with a few things. So we're already starting the proofreading, and we're working on some of the islands that are being submitted by the backers. And then we're going to be printing the book. So if you want that book out, and it's for both Pathfinder and 5e. And of course, we have a million things for Pathfinder and 5e, and you can find all that at battlezoo.com. And I'm the owner, creator, designer, whatever, publisher, Roll for Combat.
Publisher.
Sure.
Yeah, you're the publisher and the owner, and you do the visual design and
layouts. I do visual designs and layout, and the editing.
Steven does so much.
I also edit.
I do a ton of the writing, game design,
You do the game design. That's very important.
Yeah. So we are a powerful tag team. Between the two of us, we kind of do a lot.
Yeah. I don't do that much game design. I do high level game design. But Mark does the nitty gritty. He figures out the maths. And he does all the
math.
Oh, that's a lot of math. I don't want to do that. I could, but that would require me to empty out something else in my brain, and I don't have any more things to empty out.
There's too much in your brain.
That's right. So if anyone has any questions, feel free to ask them in chat. If you subscribe, or most importantly, if you super chat, we'll answer them right away. And we have no guests this week. I actually had guests, but everyone I spoke to, no one played Baldur's Gate 3 yet, including Mark, so I kind of wanted someone on the game who's been playing it, but that's okay, because I'm going to talk...
It only recently came out. There was so much...
Came out 3 weeks ago, baby! That's a lifetime!
There's been so much work to do with the Kickstarter.
In video game world. I know! That's a lifetime. Well, I've been playing it at night, because I work, 12, 14 hours a day, and then at around 9 or 10, I'll play. And I've been playing it till 2 in the morning.
You just have so much stamina, Steven. I'm impressed.
It's exciting. It's so much fun. It really can. Also, I can only play it. I'm not one of these people who can play games for not anymore. I used to be 8, 10 hours in a row. I mean, World of Warcraft, they can. Baldur's Gate is not a light game. It's not a game where you sit down and you relax. It's you got to pay attention. Combats are tough if you come in incorrectly and there's like I got into one combat and I was just getting destroyed, and then I was like, reload, and then I just got the crits off, and boom, 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 over. 2 rounds over. I was like, good, there we go. I don't mind a hard combat. I'm not cheesing anything. I'm not throwing barrels and exploding them. There's a lot of ways, because people are like, oh, this game isn't realistic, and this is not how it works in Baldur's Gate and Dungeons and Dragons, because you can do all these things in Baldur's Gate 3. I'm like, you're right. You can cheese any video game you want, but it is a personal choice whether or not you want to go down that route. I am not cheesing. I'm not, I'm basically playing the game at, I'd say, like a normal person would play, whatever that means. I'm just, some people are like, you carry around, like you get a +2 to hit if you're at higher ground. So people literally carry around barrels, stack them up, go on top of the barrels, and then start combat. So they're higher up. I'm like, I run in, do combat, and then if I see a cliff, then I run up the cliff. I take the time. I try to make it more natural in my mind. I like it that way, and that's the way I play. But some people like to cheese, and that's fine. But yeah.
But yeah, I mean, when I do a lot of work during the day, you can't play a game that is that demanding after that. I'll need something that's like
it's
more
demanding,
relaxing or less intensive, unless I have the mental energy for it. So one of these days, though.
Yeah, it's very demanding. So, but it's good though. It's good. I don't mind playing it for a few hours, but then I'm like a little burnt out. So what we're gonna do is, first of all, I want to warn that there might be some small spoilers. Everything I'm talking about happens within the first hour of 2 of the game. So there is nothing major. I'm not going to go through major points, but I'm going to go through everything that happens within the first hour or 2 of the game. So I'm going to just say that.
But we'll go through plot devices and gameplay devices.
Yeah. I'm not going to say
so
specific.
It might involve game design elements that are from later in the game, but it won't spoil specific
no.
details.
Nothing is. There's
later.
No details. But like if you're like, I want to know nothing, it's like, well, I'm going to be telling you things that happen in the first hour or 2, and it's not even specific.
They might be things that even I know just from the advertisements.
Yeah. The
advertisements for the game, that there's mind flayer stuff with getting involved with you and stuff like that.
Even that. Yeah. So I have more than 5, but so also one thing is I've played the Larian games before, which is fascinating because I remember when let's see, these developers always repeat themselves. Developers sort of have a style. Like, for example, Bungie, when they came out with Halo, people went crazy. But Bungie came out with a game called Marathon 2 and Marathon 3, which I hate to break it to was Halo. And actually, Halo was really Marathon 4. But people were like, oh my god, it's so amazing. It's like, if you played Marathon, it's the same game. They just like reskinned it. But it's pretty much the same weapons and everything. No one played Marathon because it was on the Mac back in the day. And so the same thing is, people are going crazy because they're like, oh my god, this Larian game's amazing. I'm like, well, if you played Divinity Original Sin 1 and 2, it's kind of the same game. It just has different rule set. And they fine-tuned their storytelling, but it's pretty much the same exact game. Like, one thing they do, and this is not a spoiler, is that Larian will give you one map. And I mean, it's one huge map. And that map is Act 1. And everything you're going to do in Act 1 is on that map. And then when you get off the map, then you go to Act 2. And they basically just have... Now, there's sub-maps, like when you go to dungeons and stuff, but the world map, like, that is your world. That is Act 1. And that's how all their games work. And it actually helps because it also gives you an idea of, like, how far you're done with it. And as you said, how far am I? I'm like, I know I'm done because I've kind of filled in the map, and I filled in the whole area, and now I know there's a couple of quests left, and I'll just finish those up. It's just one of those quests I got to get up to. I'm almost level 5. I gotta get level 5. I gotta get freaking Fireball, because there's one dungeon, there's one area where they're attacking me with swarms, man, and I'm like, I have no AOE, and I'm getting destroyed. I've done that combat so many times, I'm giving up. So I'm like, all right, I'm just gonna level up to 5 and then go in there and just kill everything, kill it with fire, kill it all fire. So the first thing I'm going to say, and this is general tips and tricks to help out anyone role-playing game, whether you mostly if you're DMing or even playing, and these are my personal opinions and what I think is why Baldur's Gate 3 is so popular and why it's doing so well.
And I will contextualize them with my experience on tabletop RPGs and show you how you can take the tip that Steven describes from Baldur's Gate 3 and use it yourself as a game master in your games.
So number one is start off with a bang. I cannot tell you enough times where I've read adventures or played adventures where they start off slow. Okay, there's a couple of ways to start off, and everyone thinks starting off slow and introducing people to the world slowly is a way to do it, and you can do that. There's like, I'm trying to think, like Star Wars did that. There's a lot. Lord of the Rings did that. Hobbit. It's like they slowly introduce you to the world, and then they go on an adventure.
Star Wars starts off big. But
right. Sorry, you're wrong. It does start off with a bang. I mean, correct.
Yeah, a literal bang.
A literal bang. I was thinking then when they're on the planet. But you're right.
But it starts with a bang, I think, just because they wanted to follow your idea, and then it goes to the planet and slows down. Right.
And that's actually what this. So I actually, for some reason, I was thinking of all the boring scenes on Tatooine. But you're right. You start off with a bang, and this game. And I'm sure a lot of people, or if you played it, everyone's probably seen it. If not, look up the trailer. The trailer starts off with a mind flayer inserting something into someone's eye, and people are squirming. And then suddenly, and they're flying this nautiloid ship, and they're kidnapping people. And then suddenly, red dragons appear out of nowhere, and they get into a fight. They're going through dimensional space. They're fighting each other, and then the thing ends up in hell. And you're like, what the heck just happened? And I'm like, okay, that is starting off with a bang. Like, that is an intro. And I myself was telling my friends about this a few weeks ago or a few months ago. And they were like, I didn't even hear about Baldur's Gate 3. And these guys have played Baldur's Gate 1 and 2 and everything. And they didn't even hear about it because, quite frankly, they're too busy playing other video games. They're too busy playing World of Warcraft and Elden Ring. And I was like, no, check it out. And then I'm like, they literally watched this intro. And they're like, yeah, I'm pre-ordering it. Like, that's how good the intro was. And that's how good the introduction to the world was. And I don't like adventures that start off slow. I realize there's a time and place for them. But personally, I like you throwing it right into... It's called throwing in the middle of Act 2. Which is basically, Act 1 is like the intro, Act 2 is where the action is, and then Act 3 is usually like resolution and also more action. There's this thing in storytelling where you're like, hey, you start in Act 2. Like, you start right in the action. You don't start, there's no Act 1. Act 1 comes later. And that's what I like to do. It gets you right involved with the story. It gets you involved right away. And the first session of a campaign is really important, especially if you have new players, because you don't want to bore people. I was once in a campaign that we had a first session and all we did is sit around and buy stuff for 4 hours, and we never had a second session. That was a long time ago, but like, that is not starting off a game with a kid. That's the opposite, and no one wanted to play after that.
So this is an application in games of the principle, and I saw someone say this in chat, of in media res, where, you start from the middle, you start in the action, you start somewhere interesting. And this is highly tied to even some of, Steven and I had some pretty early videos for the live portion of this channel that were about, hey, make sure to do a session 0, even maybe do a session -1. And the reason that you need to do those -1 and 0 is you get that stuff done and you get it out of the way before what counts as session 1 for your game. You don't do purchasing in that first session like Steven's group that failed. You get people together, you say, hey, what are we going to do? You figure it out and you get ready to go in and start with something exciting, and they get people into the action and gets them interested in the story. And so that's actually one of the big values of having a session 0, because you could just go not have a session 0, but then you're going to have these discussions during session 1. It'll bog it down. You won't be able to start in the actions. You won't be able to start with a bang as easily, and it'll weaken your beginning. And you might succeed anyway. It's not necessarily fatal to a campaign like the example Steven gave, but there's no reason not to give yourself the best advantage you can.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
I agree. This is a very good gameplay device, and I know a lot of modern games use it. But your description of that opening sounds even more ridiculously over the top than even some of the other ones with mind flayers, squid ships, and Yankee red dragon riders and going
Ending
into
in hell. I know.
Yep.
And that's
Like,
the first
that ups
5
the ante
minutes.
a lot in
That's
the first
5 minutes.
5 minutes.
Right. And you're like, damn. There's a lot going on in that first 5 minutes. And you want that. I mean, in our own, like Jewel the Indigo Isles, now you don't have to go big adventure. You don't have to go. Like in ours, we start off with a bang a different way. So I'm going to use our own adventure path. The game literally starts off, the adventure starts off with you in the middle of the royal chambers talking to the king and queen and the prince and princess, and they want you to find a treasure map. That's
you
it.
You have a royal audience from the beginning.
That's it.
I did a little sort of intro where I had the characters in the waiting room right before they were in the royal audience, and I asked them to introduce themselves, because I'm running our adventure too. I asked them, introduce yourselves to the others, and then tell us why the royal family might have, you may not know for sure, but why might they have chosen to bring you to this audience? What is it about you that may have piqued their interest, or what accomplishment did you have? And so that was a great way for people to get to know each other. And then we went right into an audience with the royal family and right out into the middle of an adventure for a missing pirate treasure map.
Yeah. But I'm
going to admit that's not as epic as Mind Flayer Yankee battle.
But the point is, it doesn't have to be. Yeah, it doesn't have to be. Also, if they're level 1, it's like, well, how do you throw them into the deep end at level 1? That's why it's like, well, you can do it through storytelling. Don't have it like, we could have had it that they're in the town, they're hanging out, they're getting to know each other. And it's like, no. And if we just like, no, you start off with, here's your quest, go. And you'll figure out the town later. And that's that's how actually Star Wars does it, is to like secret plans, outer space battle, go. And then you go figure out the backstory. The backstory happens next. So you do the reverse order. So that's really important, I think. And by the way, you can do that for most sessions. Like you could do that. That's not just like, oh, you do that for your intro sessions. You can do that for a lot of sessions, especially if you plan. If you're starting new books or new levels or new areas, you could definitely plan that ahead of time. And
absolutely.
Yeah, and there's one person who does that. Stephen King is really good. If you want to see it in a writing way, Stephen King's really good at this. Stephen King starts off a lot of his books with like a bang and then goes backwards.
Right. And even if you know what your adventure is going to be and you think, well, I can't get them into a ridiculous action right away with my main characters based on where they start, Star Wars can give you an example of what to do here. Because, like, yeah, Luke's on Tatooine, sure. He's not going to be doing anything. He's not in the middle of, like, shooting in an X-Wing at the beginning of the movie. But you can do a scene at the beginning of your campaign, even if the PCs are somewhere safe, that shows something else happening. Like the big space chase and the Death Star explosion and the fight with Vader coming out and the rebels all the way at the beginning of Star Wars. That, like, arguably, if you think of Luke as being like the player characters on Tatooine, that was something that was happening with other people at the time. You can have a scene that you just described to the players that may have been something that happened in the past or that's going to set things up. And that's what you probably should do if you know that your beginning doesn't have action right away for the players. If you want to really get them invested in things and make it seem very present and like pressing.
So the second one is lots of secrets. So Baldur's Gate 3, what I mean by that is, and this is a little different because it's a video game, but what they do is that you immediately are introduced to a cast of NPCs, and these become party members. And all of them have very obvious secrets. In fact, one of the very first people you meet, like we're talking within the first 2 minutes of the game, is you meet someone and she's holding a very weird object in her hand, and then she's obviously hiding it from you. And then if you try to ask about it, she just changes the topic. And you're like 2 minutes into the game, and you're like, what? And there's a secret. Every single one of these NPCs has secrets, and you learn right away. One of them needs magic items and consumes them. Why? You don't know why, but he just needs you to give him some magic items, and he needs to eat them, and they're destroyed. You'll find out later why. Like every single one of these NPCs has something very secretive that's very obvious, and then throughout the story, and in this game, you find out pretty quick, by the way. The other thing they do, which I like, because Brandon Sanderson does this, they call this the Brandon Sanderson approach, as opposed to the who did Wheel of Time? George R. R. Martin. George R. R. Martin.
Wheel of Time was Robert Jordan.
I mean, Robert Jordan. Sorry, George Jordan.
Was the
Robert Jordan.
Song of Ice and Fire.
Yeah. So Robert Jordan, oh my God, he was so bad at this. He would give you secrets and MacGuffins, and then he wouldn't talk about them for 5 books. Robert Jordan will give secrets and pretty much give you the results of those MacGuffins within the same book or within a few chapters.
Or you mean Brandon Sanderson?
Brandon Sanderson. I keep messing up my names. And then just to keep introducing new ones. And it works because it keeps you interested, because you're like, oh, what's that? What's that secret? And these could be MacGuffins. So the cube is the MacGuffin. And a MacGuffin is, if you don't know what a MacGuffin is, look it up. It is a famous, fake object that people are interested in that either has something to do with the plot or not at all. But it advances.
Term that was coined by Alfred Hitchcock to mean like just the thing that everybody is trying to get or find, whether or not it actually is super relevant or just people want it.
Yeah. Now, every single person in this, and you find out, like, you start off this game within 30 minutes. Not only do you have a party, but everyone has secrets, and you have secrets. And then in the dialogue trees, it's like, well, what's your secret? And they're like, well, what's your secret? And everyone's like asking each other about their secrets, and no one's like comfortable talking about them. But what that does is it gets you very interested in the story. It keeps you very interested in talking with characters and finding out locations, plots, people, because suddenly you have something to investigate, so something you're now interested in the story, you're interested in the world around you. And
absolutely,
they do this like crazy in this game. But that is something you really need to do in your games. You need to keep people, that's how you keep people interested.
For sure.
Yeah. Fighting will only go so far.
In fact, going all the way back to the those old Dungeon Craft columns back in Dungeon Magazine, the second rule of Dungeon Craft is when you create some kind of major element as a game master, always create a secret. And Baldur's Gate 3 completely followed those rules in there, and that's part of what makes things compelling. That's something you can do too in your games. Just, it doesn't have to be like a major secret that like every time you create a good cleric they're secretly evil or something like that. It doesn't have to be a stereotype. It could just be a secret that like it ultimately at the end just adds a little interest or is embarrassing to the NPC. Maybe the good cleric you created like secretly likes sweets, but they have a very stern persona and they don't want people to know that. I'm not saying that is necessarily as interesting as some other secrets, but sometimes someone's secret is more mundane. The idea of just like have at least some secret, because secrets and keeping secrets and finding out secrets, like Steven said, you don't have to keep them forever, then no one will ever know, and it'll be like you didn't have a secret. But secrets being kept and revealed brings tension and interest to players and their characters. And it's okay to reveal some of those secrets to the players before their characters find out. Because for the same reason that research has shown that most people actually enjoy things more with spoilers than without spoilers. Even if they say that they hate spoilers and they get mad at the spoiler, they then wind up enjoying the final thing that was spoiled a little bit better, possibly because they could see things from another angle. Nobody knows why. They just did like sort of a blind testing between different groups. Similarly, you can reveal some of those secrets through scenes like the one I mentioned, which is just like a scene with the NPCs, or just let one of the players know and say it out loud to everybody. Be like, your characters don't know this except Steven's character does. And it can add a lot to the game.
Yeah, there's in Baldur's Gate 3. Oh boy, I've never seen this many. There's secrets on top. There's so many secrets. Everything has a secret. Every area has a secret. Every NPC has a secret. Every quest has a secret. There's a lot. But that's why it's easy to play, and that's what you get the slot machine effect. The slot machine effect is the famous effect of why you keep doing the slot machine is because you get a little dopamine hit every time you pull the lever, and you're like, oh, did I get something? No. And then you get like either a small prize, medium prize, big prize, and you keep pulling it to get those little prizes. Secret works the same way. It's like you get all these secrets, and every time I play, I find out a little bit more, and I'm like, ooh, and then I find out the secret. I'm like, ooh, more secrets, and then it's really addictive to keep learning all these little secrets and to keep advancing the plot, and then to actually even get closer. In this case, you get closer to the NPCs, and then once you find out their secrets, you help them with their quests and help them figure out their secrets. Usually lead to a quest or an issue, and then you help them with it. And by the way, we had a super chat from
Derek gave a super chat because he was saying the same Ray Winnegar rule of dungeon craft in chat while I was saying it out loud.
I know.
And said,
it's funny.
This is why I love Mark, quoting Winnegar's rules of dungeon craft.
I forgot about that, actually. I just wrote it out because I just made this list based on me playing the game and trying to use the game itself to see why and I'm doing it from I'm literally doing it from a video game point of view, why it's so good and why it's so popular.
I'm doing it from a game designer point of view for any style of game, but also specifically from the point of view of tabletop RPG, so that we can translate it to what you need to do as a GM to make your game cool in the same way that caused Baldur's Gate 3 to draw on your players.
Oh my god,
because chances are your players were pretty drawn in by Baldur's Gate 3. So,
it's so good.
Let's figure out how to make sure they'll be drawn into your games too.
So the next one, and this one's probably the first minor spoiler, but nothing major. You're going to find out about this within the first hour. Conflicting factions. And within the game, within the very first hour, you find out that there's a big conflict within two factions that are against each other. And within the faction, there's conflicts within the factions of how to resolve the overall conflict. So you have this overall conflict of two factions. Within each faction, there's conflicts within the factions of how to resolve the larger faction. And then within the leaders of each of these sub-factions, they have conflicts. So it's this nesting doll of conflicts. And you are given quests to help either investigate or solve each of these, and you can do it lots of ways. Actually, that's the other thing. Baldur's Gate 3, I'm playing a bard, and 9 times out of 10, I'm talking my way out of these. These would go to fights, but I'm almost always talking my way out. And you still get the XP. You don't get the loot, but you know what? Loot in a video game, I don't really. You'll get loot. I don't worry about loot. Loot you'll get. And Baldur's Gate's 3 pretty good. They'll give you like they'll give you compensation loot if you do it the talking way. And I kind of like it, and keeping everyone alive. I'm doing it as much as possible.
That's cool.
Yeah, it's
That's
fun.
something I liked about Planescape Torment actually over like Baldur's Gate 1, the original Baldur's Gate. You usually wound up having to fight most of the things in the end. Baldur's Gate 2, there were some ways to do role-playing and skullduggery depending on what quest you were doing, and in Planescape Torment you could just talk it out like almost all the time, except for a few dungeon areas, and even like multiple different ways to role play talking out with the final boss. So like, I think that's pretty awesome.
So they do it, and this example literally has 3 levels of conflict. You have overall, within, and then sub. And That,
So wait, there's a third one? Because you said there's
yes,
a conflict between two groups. Well,
yes,
I'll just say that they're the Mind Flayers and the Get Yankee on the Red
they're not, but
Dragons.
it's
But
you
sure,
know,
there's two
yeah,
groups, and then within those groups, they have conflicts about like how do we win our conflict with the other group. But then there's a
yes,
third conflict
yes.
within those subgroups about how they can like convince the other
I'll
groups.
give you an example. Okay, and this is a little
Okay.
spoiler. Okay, so there's a cavalcade that's being invaded by bad guys. I'm being general here.
Okay.
And they're being attacked. And and their leader has been captured by the other faction. So right away, it's like, okay, we are in trouble. This other group, the monsters are attacking us. They captured a leader. We have two options. Our options either we go attack them and kill the monsters, but we're not powerful enough to really do that, or we perform a ritual and seal ourselves out of the world forever. And no one will ever find us ever again. We're literally like displacing ourselves. And so the conflict within them is, okay, do we attack the monsters and get back our leader, or do we just give up and disappear into the ether? Within that faction, the guests within this cavalcade are being asked to leave and don't live there anymore. And now they're like, wait, we can't, you're going to throw us out into the monsters and you're going to have us get killed? And they're like, sorry, we're out of here. And then so you have the leaders within the faction, and each of them are like, one of them comes to you and says, please don't let them throw us out. And then the other leader's like, too bad, I'm giving you a quest to throw them out. So you're literally getting conflicted quests. One quest is throw them out. The other quest is to have us stay. So that's the faction within that.
So that's really cool.
Yeah.
And conflict, as we've mentioned before several times on this show in different episodes, conflict is fundamentally conflict with negotiation, resolution, some way of two people who have different ideas, or two groups that need to go against each other and find out which one is going to prevail. That's like the fundamentals to playwriting, to script writing, for movies, and so many other kinds of media. And so it's no surprise here that a very successful game is going to make use of having conflicts, and not just one dimension, but on multiple dimensions.
Yeah.
If you just have this cosmic good and evil, and that's the only conflict, and everybody's roses within each of the two groups, and there's not a lot of interesting tapestry of subgroups and subfactions, then that makes your game a lot flatter. And that could be okay if you're not trying to make a game that's like Baldur's Gate 3, and you're trying to just like, yeah, we just want to do some fights over some beer and pretzels. That's probably okay. But if you want your game to have more depth and to have people really get invested into the world and the different people and groups there, by having those sub-conflicts, you are able to personalize a little bit of the way the conflicts go, in a way that you might not if it's just like, well, you chose your side, good or evil, and of course you're good because we decided that ahead of time, so you're just kind of doing your own thing. Because different PCs might side or have sympathies for different parts of the sub-conflicts that you create.
And so just to go into a little more detail, any other video game would just have their side A and their side B, which are you siding with? And that's it. This is hours. This is 25, 30 hours of you. First, you have to, and it's a nesting doll. First, you got to go, and you go to both. That's the other thing. You go to the monsters. They let you in. I mean, you can just go and kill them all, but quite frankly, it's very easy for you to get in. And there's reasons why they let you in. And then you go around and talk to them and get their side of the story. So you're like, damn, you're finding out everyone has a side to the story, and everyone has a reason why they're doing it. And you can pick either one. All these options are viable, which is also insane that they didn't even have a simple option of just, okay, you pick the monsters or you pick the cavalcade. No, you can have all those sub options I just described. Every single one of them is possible. Every single one. You can kick out you can literally kick out the the people visiting there, then go help out the monsters and kill everyone. Or you can kick out those people, the cavalcade disappears into the ether, and then the monsters kill everyone. Or you can, I mean, you name it, like every option is possible. And that's something that people are saying why this game is so good, and it's so similar to, it's not a perfect role-playing game, but it's pretty damn close, is that any other game would only have a black and white option, or maybe 3 or 4. There's dozens of options, and any one of them can be done. They can all be done in this game. And they don't cheap out. They don't make it like in the end. And that's one of the big problems people had with Mass Effect 3. So Mass Effect 2 and 3 had a huge falling out with the community because they were being told through Mass Effect 1, Mass Effect 2, and then Mass Effect 3 that all of your actions was going to have consequences in the end. And in the end, there basically was 2 endings. And people were like, wait a second, where's the nuance? Where was like all the background that we did? Like it was like all that, and you just gave us really 2 endings. That's it. Well, in this game, there are dozens, hundreds, thousands of permutations of endings, and they did them all. They did every single one.
Yeah, they gave the number, and it's ridiculously
17,000.
high, but I'm sure. I'm
but that's
sure
the
that
ending of the
only
game.
A small number of those are like very different from each other.
I'm talking about this. This is one quest, the main quest in Act 1, and there are thousands of ways for this to play out, and each one is custom based on how you do it. And that alone is making people lose their minds. And then that's throughout the whole game. My point being is that you can do that because you're human. You don't need to worry about video games. You can do all the nuanced, conflict of all these different factions.
And if the players pick something weird, you can just go with it. You can be like, yeah, you know what? You wanted to side with that? I didn't consider that before, but we'll work it out.
Yeah.
Whereas many video games can't give you that human touch. And the fact that Baldur's Gate 3 took the effort to like have people think it out and be like, what weird things might people sometimes want to do? And then be like, yep, you know what? We're going to let them do that. That makes it different. Even than some beloved games in the same subgenre that I've played before, where they give you a decent number of options, but you still are sometimes like, well, I kind of didn't want to do any of these. I don't like any of these people that much. What about the other ones? So I think that by virtue of trying to think of everything you might want to do, in this case, Baldur's Gate 3 is just approximating something that you as the GM can already do in your home game. So that's not something you need to do special effort to, other than to remember not to say no when the players try to do something different and take a third route when you thought there were 2 options, but instead think about it. Think about the implications. Maybe if it's too different and you may need to call for a break or be like, we need to end the session, I'll figure it out for next time. But try to go with a yes and or a yes but. It's like, oh yeah, you could side with the blink dogs, I guess. I didn't think you were going to do that. But in that case, and then bring more adventure from there.
By the way, people are saying about the ending. Here's the thing. I don't care about the ending. The ending it's a 150-hour game. It's the journey, not the destination. I'm talking about things that are this is why it's impressive. It's not impressive because, the ending is so cool. No, that's not the impressive part. The impressive part is that it allows you to do all of this up to the ending. Okay? I don't even know what the ending is. I don't want to know. No one spoil. But the point is that while you're playing the game, you feel like your actions have true consequences. And the factions, you always want to have things against one another, and you will always, some of the best stories always have that. Lord of the Rings is basically nothing but factions against, and if you think about it, Lord of the Rings, perfect example. Factions, good and evil, sub factions within each faction fighting.
Absolutely.
It's and that's why it's such an interesting book. And then of course Game of Thrones Exact same thing. All these books, all these, because that's how the real world works too. I mean, that's something else. It's like nothing is black and white, good and evil. There's always all these sub factions that are fighting within each other. Last one, not last one. We're up to 4. 4 is, and this one, and Stephen King is the master at this, is that they have breadcrumbs to future goals and places, locations. And what I mean by that is you want to telegraph basically where characters might end up. And it really helps because it gives them goal-oriented. A good example of this. So Baldur's Gate starts off in an autoloid, and then you end up in the middle of nowhere. Now, everyone's talking about Baldur's Gate in this game, and everyone says about it's a major plot point of people talking about being in Baldur's Gate. When you rescue people, they will say later, "Hey, I'll see you. Look me up in Baldur's Gate." Like, it just keeps coming up. The freaking game is called Baldur's Gate 3. I don't think it's a spoiler to tell you. You're going to end up in Baldur's Gate at some point. Okay? That's going to be in the game. But you don't start there. I've played 50 hours and I haven't even sniffed. I'm still in the wilderness. Is that a spoiler? Not at all. It's giving me, I'm rescuing people.
You might, I'm pretty sure you don't go to Baldur's Gate in Baldur's Gate 2. I'm sure you will at Baldur's Gate 3, but just because it's called Baldur's Gate...
Baldur's Gate 2, what city are you in? Is that Candle?
You're in Athkatla, the capital of Anne.
Oh, right. I can't remember. I've played that one hundreds. I can't remember. I thought it was like Candlekeep or something.
No, you're in Athkatla, and then you go to the island, and then you go to the Underdark.
Right.
And then you go to the Elves.
Okay, well, in this game...
you ever go to Baldur's Gate in Baldur's Gate 2.
Fair enough. But in this game, they tell you right away, because they tell you they start off within the first hour. They're like, "Oh, how far away is Baldur's Gate?" They're like, "Oh, it's like 10 days." And they say that right in the beginning. And then you continuously are rescuing or finding people. And after the end, whenever they go away, they're like, "Look me up in Baldur's Gate." And they all say that, And that's a trick in the game to let you look forward to something, to keep you going. Okay? It moves the plot forward and keeps you questing and wanting to go forward with the game. It's very subtle, but they do it really well, and they do it a lot. And once you're aware of it, you're like, "Holy crap, they're doing it all the time." They're always telling me about things that are happening in the future that I'm not aware of, but I'm going to be aware of, and it helps move you forward. It helps to give you direction in the game. I like to do that a lot. I like to just tell players, like, for example, in my Ages of Edgewatch game, they're working for... Oh, that is a super... I can't say it's a super spoiler because it's like now we're in book 5. But I'm going to say they're doing some jobs and working with some people, and they were told they have to do like 5 or 6 things. And if they do those 5 or 6 things, then they'll get to do one big thing. So they know. I'm like, okay, let's work on these to get to that, which will then get us the next... There's like, okay, our overall goal is this. To get the overall goal, we need to do this, but to do that, to get to this meeting, we need to do 5 subquests. So we do these 5 subquests, which will get us to the meeting, which will get us information to get us to our main goal. And that is, that is signposting, it's breadcrumbs, there's a lot of names for it, but it's very, very useful in TTRPGs because it keeps your players engaged and it keeps them questing towards an overall larger goal. The Sims does this too, by the way. I've talked about this a million times. Will Wright is the master of this, is that he gives you something to do for the next week, or something like goals, and this is your life too. People have goals for the next year, the next month, the next week, the next day, the next hour, the next minute. You have all these nested goals. So you want to do the same thing. You want to give nested goals for people so that they're not worried about just this session or the next session. They want to know what's going on and where they're going for the next couple of sessions, the next couple of months, even the next couple of years if you're playing an adventure path. So you have goals and you can see them, because it also then gives you a great sense of satisfaction as you complete them and you check them off.
Oh, this is one that is trickier for you to apply than it is for Baldur's Gate 3.
Correct.
Unlike the last one where it was actually easier for you.
Well, unless you're an adventure path. If you're an adventure path.
I was about to say, if you happen to have an adventure path or some other very long-term adventure that's relatively on rails, and you're weighted until the later volumes came out so that you can actually read all of them ahead, you can absolutely do this. So, for example, I was running an adventure path where in book 2, there's like a bad guy who has charmed a judge and has the judge under her thumb. And I decided that in between book 1 and book 2, that like the villains that the PCs brought back alive would hire a defense attorney and try to like get off for their crimes and claim that the PCs just attacked them in their base, and that the prosecutor who helped the PCs win the case would be the person who charmed the judge, and the charmed judge would be the one presiding. And it was rigged so the PCs would win. But she was just very nice to them and gave them lots of good food and asked them, like, please describe like what you did here so we can show that like it was a legitimate situation. She wrote down all of their tactics and strategies that they discussed. And then when they later fought her, then they really didn't, it meant more because I had put those breadcrumbs in there. And also she was ready for the tactics they had described having used in book 1 since, well, they told it to her to win the court case that they had gone into. So those are the kind of things you can do with a published adventure when you're kind of improvising along and you're just doing it one adventure at a time, which is a perfectly viable strategy for a campaign. One thing you can do is put in open-ended breadcrumbs. Put in something that maybe you're not sure exactly what it means right now, but that you could potentially use later. The value of this is that there's actually multiple reasons why foreshadowing is tough. One of them, like we alluded to before when Steven said Adventure Pass can help you, is that you might not even know what's coming next. The other is that your players probably won't remember the foreshadowing because tabletop RPGs, it's a while between each session, especially if it takes a while especially if the foreshadowing doesn't come up next session, which it might not. It's not the same as Baldur's Gate 3 where you can just stay up at night and play tons of stuff and see where the foreshadowing comes into place. Because of that, you're going to need to remind them about the foreshadowing potentially, which may lessen its effect. Or if you pick foreshadowing that is a little bit, you're not even sure of what it means exactly, but it's very ominous. It's just like, there's like a mysterious note with a symbol drawn on it. You can have that symbol show up in a few more places along the way until you eventually figure out what it is. And then it starts popping up all over the place. And by then, since you've foreshadowed it multiple times, the PCs and the players might remember it. So think of ways you can use the techniques of foreshadowing that will help you go against some of the innate disadvantages in a tabletop RPG for foreshadowing.
So, what I was saying about that, it's very hard to foreshadow, but if you know they're going to go to specific places or towns or areas, you can do that. You can try to foreshadow it. But again, this one's a little tricky, but I play long adventure paths and I play long adventures where the PCs are expected to go, from levels 1 to 12 or 13 or 20 even, and just keep going. So for me, it's a little easier to do this, but I am saying why Baldur's Gate 3 succeeds, and this one's tougher to do in a TTRPG, but it can be done. You definitely can do it if you're being a little bit more railroady than open worldy, then this is definitely something you can do. And the fifth one is, this one's the most interesting one, is a combo. It's create consequences to PC's actions and let them fail. It's a combo. Because the thing that's amazing about this game that I've never really seen done to this extent, you can kill everyone in this game. And I mean, you can kill off every single companion you're supposed to get. You could just go crazy and the game keeps going. It doesn't care. It keeps going. They figured out how to make the game work, even if you kill everything. And I'm stunned. I'm like, it's like normally these games start to break down or it's very hard, or they make something unkillable. The last one that really, Fable lets you do this. Fable also lets you go around killing everyone, and the story kept working. But you don't need to go to that extent. The extent of is that there's a lot of times where you're going to do rolls, and in this game, you're going to fail. And it's okay because they have actually some pretty funny things happen. And in fact, now I can't. This is like super spoily. I'm going to do super vague, but there's a
So
scene.
yeah, do it vague to avoid
It's
the
super
spoilers.
vague, but there's a part in this game because it's pretty far in when this happens, where you're giving choices, and the choices you do are bad. Okay, and I mean they're really, really bad, and it is
There's no
just
good option.
there's just it. Well, it goes from bad to worse to much worse, and they describe it. It's bad. The animations, I literally couldn't watch it. I couldn't watch the screen. It was so revolting and so horrible, but I kept going. And this goes on for like 10 minutes. But at the end, and I was like, I just wanted to see what would happen because I'm like, I'm not keeping this. This is horrible. But at the end, I got such a good reward, and it was so worth it, even though I'm damaged forever. I was like, oh my god, I'm keeping this in my main game, even though it was horrible. Horrible consequences that really I should not do, and I'm sure I'm going to pay the price for this way later in the game. But damn, it was worth it. And I know why they did that. They made this thing so horrific in the sound effects and the descriptions and the animations. And it wouldn't stop. It just kept going and going. And it was horrible. It was just one failure after another after another. And it just would not stop. But then they give you something for it because they feel bad for you. And I'm like, damn, I'm keeping it. So, I guarantee the only reason I did that is because I'm the type of person I like to see the options, so I'm sitting there playing it. I'm like, I'm not doing this. This is the really, really, really bad option. Do not do this. But damn, they rewarded me for it, and I'm like, okay. And I kept it. That's my main save. We'll see what happens, but I would have never done it. I would never done it. Zycar is correct, but there's multiples of that. By the way, that happens more than once in the game, and I did the worst one.
So to apply this to your tabletop
Yeah.
RPG, actions have consequences and allow there to be failures. What you want to think about is when you're asking the PCs to roll something, when you're turning something into a conflict that you're actually zooming in on the screen, make sure it has interesting consequences. Make sure there's something interesting that will happen if they succeed and something that interesting that will happen if they fail. If they fail and it's just like, oh, nothing happens, try again until they succeed, then what's the point? And Pathfinder 2 tries to help you with this with interesting critical failures that cause some kind of a setback. But you think about how to fail forward with interesting results. And the PC's dying is, a negative result that can happen if they fail, but it's usually the least interesting you can do to a player character is kill them. There's so many things that can happen to them as a consequence of their failure that are more narratively interesting and, as Steven described there, sometimes more horrifying than merely killing them. And so try to think about fun success and failure effects that will not only move the story forward, but that will engage your players and make them understand that both succeeding and failing can be fun. Now, that's something that's a little bit challenging for those who cut their teeth mostly on D&D and Pathfinder and similar games, because in a lot of those, when you fail, you die, or there's a stone wall in your progress. Pathfinder 2 talks about failing forward more, but most D&D likes do not. There are other tabletop RPGs you might be able to try out that can help you with that. One's like in the Burning Wheel system, where you need to succeed and fail a certain number of times to raise a skill. Think about helping your players understand the fun of what a failure can lead to. I know we've talked on the show multiple times about how sometimes the weird critical failure effect is the one you remember 20 years later, whereas you don't remember just like, oh yeah, we won that fight again. It was just like any other fight.
Oh yeah, I always I will never forget that scene. But I've said it before, and people, there's a bit of a spoiler, but in if you listen to our podcast, our Dead Sons podcast, they are. I've said it before. We have a final fight. It lasted 2 months of real time. It goes on, I think, like 8 episodes. It's a huge fight, and they knew the final fight. They knew this is the end of the book. This is the end of the game. The end of the campaign. This is it. And they had this huge plan. They spent I think 2 sessions figuring it out, and they had they had a robot named Cheddar, and Cheddar had a thing called the button, and you press the button, and you would roll on a table of 1 to 100 of what would happen, and it could be anything. 100 was really good. Most of it was in the middle, but if you rolled a 1, which they never did, by the way, it's always something bad. Okay, so they had figured out the plan. They buffed themselves up. They open the doors. The big boss is there. He gives his speech. They send in Cheddar. They press the button. They roll a 1. And they're like, uh-oh. And what happens? And I look at the table, which I wrote, and I said, self-destruct sequence begins. You have 6 seconds to get to a safe distance, which is 1 round. And I'm like, oh no, there goes our plan. And I was like, pretty much. And that was it. And that was the end of the session. I'm like, I guess we'll find out next week. And they were like, oh no, but we've never forgot, because all those plans, everything gone. And sure enough, they moved him in, he exploded, and chaos reigned, and everything went out the window, and we never forgot it. So it's like failing forward is fun. I love failing forward.
And Mirtos in the super chat brings up a related point that I kind of alluded to slightly, which is that it's not only important to try to come up with ways to fail forward and make failure and success both interesting, but you know what? Sometimes there just isn't something, right? Sometimes failing just is like nothing happens, and success is that you get the thing that you need.
No.
And maybe, as Mirtos points out, maybe you just shouldn't do that as a role. Maybe just give it to him.
Yeah.
What's the harm? If it's absolutely crucial and it's either fail and the plot just doesn't happen until you keep rolling until it succeeds, and you don't have a good fail forward consequence, and it's just not going to matter ultimately, just more D20s are going to drop, you can just give it to them. There are sometimes situations where the stakes are such, or the time it takes is so low, you can keep trying again, and there's no consequences for failure, that you can just do it. There's no need to feel like you need a roll for every single thing that could possibly happen.
And by the way,
to see if you trip when you're walking.
By the way, this create consequences to PC's actions. I had it both ways. This happened on Monday. So here's a story you don't know, Mark. Okay. Here's a new one. Agents of Edgewatch, 15th level. There's a portal to hell. Actually, it's a portal to the abyss. It's not to hell.
Fair enough.
There's a portal to the abyss below them. 50-foot portal to the abyss. A demon lord, a plant demon lord, level 19, has come out of the abyss. Floating over the abyss on a chain of gold, on 4 chains of gold, think of it like a pyramid, is a ruby. 50 feet up in the air. None of them can fly.
Touch nothing but the lamp.
And they know, because they rolled a critical arcana check, that if that ruby that's 50 feet up in the air, it's keeping this portal open, and it has runes on it. And if they can get up there and mess up those runes, the portal will close, the demon will go away, and they will get 10,000 gold pieces worth of golden rubies.
Nice.
They roll initiative, and who goes first? The monk, the thief, the demon. Okay, that's the order. Monk, thief, demon. Monk and thief are both legendary in acrobatics, in thievery. They're amazing. They're up to the legendary levels. And the monk goes first. And the monk's like, all right, can't fly. Can I run up the chain and get to that ruby? I'm like, you're a 15th level monk that's legendary. Of course you can. I'm not even, I made him do a roll, but I wasn't too worried. I mean, if you rolled a 1.
Technically a balance check, but it's probably easy enough that even on a 1, that might still be a success.
These guys
instead
are
of a critical
gods.
success, and you just go at half speed,
Yeah.
and anything else is full speed.
These guys are gods. I'm like, yeah, they're legendary. They're in the 40s. I'm like, yeah,
Yep.
of course. And it's a very tight. In fact, okay, you run on it, you run up there. And he's like, okay. And then he ran to the other side. He was so sneaky. He ran up and did a backflip and landed on the other side of the ruby to leave room for the thief who wasn't as fast as him. So I was like, you do that. Okay, that's your first action. And then, okay, second action. And then they tried to, he didn't really want to disable the device because that was two actions. So he's like, can I like punch it or, break it or bite it? And I'm like, okay, fine. And then actually, no, he did disable device. Sorry, he did because he was good. So he does disable device. That's two actions. He like tries to do it. He fails. I'm like, all right, well, try. And then he's like, hero point. I'm like, okay. He tries again. He got 1 point higher. I'm like, you failed. It was like a 34 to 35. He needed a 43. And I was like, all right, well, if it was close, maybe. But I'm like, all right, you're up there. You're almost there. Thief's turn. Now, the thief would probably need 2 actions to get up there, realistically. But you know what? It was so cool. If you're gonna go and run on this chain over a pit to freaking hell with a demon lord, a 20-foot, a gargantuan demon lord below you, I'll give it to you in 1 action. Okay, there's no that's the rule of cool. Like you get up there, and I think he had a natural 22. That was it. He's like natural 20. I'm like, you get up there in 1 round.
Critical success, you go at double speed.
Yeah,
like, that makes sense.
Yeah. I'm like,
that's even how balancing usually works.
Yeah. I'm like, yeah, you run right up there, no problem. And then I'm like, okay, you're up there. What are you gonna do? You got 2 actions, and he's like, I'll disable device. Natural 20, and I'm like, you did it. And then I'm like, you chipped away, and the portal closed, and everything sucks in, and of course then you fell 150 feet. But of course the monk had, I don't know, one of those feats where he can fall any amount and never take damage. I did have the thief grab an edge, and he grabbed the chain and held on. The monk fell 150 feet, actually 210 feet into the pit. Sorry, 200 feet into the pit. Landed, took no damage because he has some feat that lets him do that, and he was fine. And then I'm like, okay, what do the other 2 people do? And they're like, golf clap. Because they were just sitting there watching this. It's like, we just give you a golf clap because we had nothing to do with this. And that's the part. That's like create consequences, because that's the consequences that they did of something awesome. They won. Everyone was happy. They loved it. And if they failed, oh, baby, that was going to be some nasty. It's going to be bad if that demon went. It was a level 19 demon lord, baby, and it was a plant. I always say that. I'm like, what's the deadliest thing in Pathfinder? Plants. And I'm like, you're facing a plant demon lord. And my friend's like, well,
would that make it less deadly if it's
nice
like part
knowing
demon
you
lord?
all. It's like, we're all going to die. Hey, Dougie McDougal saves the day. Yeah, that's right. Zalxar, it was Dougie McDougal. He saved the day. But you know what? Like, it was worth it, and that's the consequences. Now, did I expect them to do that? Well, let me rephrase that. Did I expect anyone else to do that? Probably not. Now, I've known these guys 35, 40 years. You think I'm crazy, Mark? You should play with these guys. They're all like me, as you can see. It's like, what's the choices? You're given choice A, B, and C. It's like, I take choice X. I'm like, there is no choice X. That's right. I'm going to make choice X, and that's the one I'm going to choose. They always do that. So you really got to be on your toes. And sure enough, I'm like, I'm running up there, baby. I'm doing it. I was like, okay, you guys, I did not expect that. And anyone else would normally not do that. I told you in the Mothership game. Remember, I played that Mothership game. I'm like, the GM's like, I played that game a lot, and no one's ever did what you did, Steve. I was like, I know, because we always go crazy, man. But that's the thing. But there was consequences. The consequence to my action, is I died in that Mothership game. But it was fun.
For them was they were over a portal to the abyss.
Yeah,
there's a demon lord down there.
Yeah,
like there's a lot of tension because if you fall into that portal, it's a long way down.
Yeah, well, it would have. I was like, that could have been a. There could have been a lot of. That could have gone a lot of ways. I was like, there's a lot of ways this can go. You can go fall in there. It could attack. I mean, it was bad. It was so bad. I kept thinking, like, how am I gonna? I was actually thinking the whole time, like, so how am I gonna run this adventure in the abyss? And I'm like looking up things about the abyss because I'm like, they're gonna end up down there at this point, but they didn't. And the thing is, don't think about like what if. Just go with it. You know, don't worry about the consequences. Because in that was case, that's good consequences. There's bad consequences too, but that's the other side. Is that I could see myself maybe 20, 30 years ago, if I wasn't as experienced of a GM, I'd say, no, you can't do that because I didn't want to deal with what happens if they fall in, and then I got to think about how to run the adventure because now they're in the abyss, and I'm like, ugh, what a nightmare. I don't know anything about the abyss, and I got to build all these new sections, and I'm not prepared for that. And that's probably what I would have done when I was younger. But now I'm like, whatever, we'll figure it out. And we'll figure it out. And you know what? I didn't have to, thankfully. But I've had that happen too. I've had them do weird stuff. And you know what? I once had them fall into like a volcano and they had to get out and they found down there a Zorn casino. Like there's a Zorns running a casino. They're like, what's this? And I was like, yeah, it's a fun casino. And they loved it. You know, it's like, you just make crap up, man. You never know. And that ended up being one of the most fun things we ever did because they fell into an area they weren't supposed to go in and they just had to make stuff up on the spot. So anyhow,
Makes sense.
I have a few more, but I don't want to go too long with this one. Sorry, my nose is running. I gotta go catch it. It's running away. If anyone has any chats or super chats, now is the time because I think we're going to wrap this one up soon because I don't want to go forever on this topic.
That makes sense. How many more do you have?
I'm only going to give one.
Your top 5.
I'm going to give the extra. I'll give one extra.
Bonus 6th.
Yeah. Now this one is a little. This is more of a Baldur's Gate 3 thing. Then I don't know if you. This I don't think is as important in all of your RPGs because you do need rest points. Give each location a purpose. That's the bonus one. So there's no wasted space in Baldur's Gate 3. Okay. There's every place you go, you know there's going to be something exciting for you to do there. Video games do this very well. I'll give you an example of 2 games that do this probably better than anyone else. There's a little game called Zelda, and another game called Elden Ring. They both do this, and they adhere to this. Is that I won't get into it. There's a lot of videos that go into this in extreme detail of how Zelda is purposely built so that there's always something in the background, the foreground, the midground, and they always have things for you to see and do. So you always have locations to go forward to, and that sort of is, by the way, breadcrumbs to future goals. That's tip number 4. And then tip number 6 is, but each location you're currently in has something for you to do. And it could be as simple as just opening a treasure chest or going on a quest or checking out a cave. Okay, but there's always something to do. Baldur's Gate does that very well. Like, even when you're traveling down the road, you'll come across, skeletons and the scenes of a fight. And you're like, ooh, what happened here in this little story? You don't know what the story is. Maybe you find a note and you read the note and you find out that there was like a lover's quarrel and that's what that was. But there's always something interesting. There's always a little story. There's always something going on. Obviously, some of the bigger areas you go to have bigger stories, but there's always something happening in each of these locations. And it makes it really interesting because it always keeps you engaged with the story. Now, again, video games, this is a lot more important in video games because in video games, they're real time, and there's nothing worse than walking for 5-10 minutes.
It's important for tabletop RPGs, but in a different way.
In a different way, okay.
I'm going to tell you how you can use that tip as a GM in your own game.
Okay.
Which is think about where and when you are spending focus time. Where you're moving the camera, where you're zooming in on the scene. Like Steven said, video game is going to be real time all the time. So they have to do this in space.
Yeah.
They have to make sure that every location is relevant or interesting and that it's not like Baldur's Gate 1 where some of those maps were almost empty that you could go to in the wilderness and it wasn't as good as Baldur's Gate 2 or Baldur's Gate 3 for that reason.
Mm-hmm.
But in your game, Well, the world is kind of infinitely large, but you only have the focus, the lens of where you, as the game master, describe things, where the players and their characters decide to go. So you get to decide what you're going to abstract over when you're just going to say you travel for a week and then reach the town of Glicaria. Or you could spend time describing each day of that week of travel. It's like, well, the first day, the worst thing that happened was mosquitoes bit Bob's character and Jane's character got a rash in the morning. But then the second day was you made it into the swamp, we heard ominous chanting out. Like, you could also do that. Think about how you're going to move the camera and move the time and pacing in the game in order to make sure there's always something interesting happening. There's something cool for the players to do. Don't bother doing it day by day and asking them about like this hour of this day, what are you going to do? If there's not anything for them to find from doing that, just maybe if you really care because there's going to be an ambush at some point, ask what their daily routine is overall, and then just apply that across the time. So that's how you can use the tips that video game designers use when building for level design in your story design.
Yeah, I mean, I can keep going, but I'm going to stop. We could do another one of these if we wanted.
Oh, yeah,
but
absolutely.
There's like all this stuff I'm talking about. If you look up any of them, there's a lot of videos on everyone I gave, and how this is, from a game design point of view, and especially some of the more advanced ones, like that last one I just said. I forgot what it's called, but there's a video of like how Zelda was built. And how, because that's an open world, and open worlds are different. This is a linear game.
Each of these 6 tips could be an entire video.
Yeah. Like that's last one actually is fascinating because the way they built Zelda, both Zelda games, was always giving you somewhere to go and giving you goals and multiple goals, right. And it's very well done, and that's the second highest rated game this year.
If you want to see us talking about Zelda and how to apply those tips that Steven knows about into your tabletop RPGs, tell us in the comments or in the comments right now.
Yeah, the Zelda tips are different.
Like and subscribe and all those other kind of cool things that we really enjoy when you do, because it helps the algorithm.
Yeah, by the way, so Zelda tips are completely different because Zelda and Elden Ring are open world, and I'd even say Grand Theft Auto 5 and a few others. Open world games have a very different mechanic. In fact, I was talking to a friend of mine, and he does not like Baldur's. He's the only person I met who doesn't like Baldur's Gate 3 because he wants it to be an open world game, and he was furious that it forces him to do the quests. But I was like, well... And he's like, why can't...
I like it better when it's not as open. So
right.
I'll just be the opposite of your friend.
Oh, well, the point is...
I can enjoy an open world game, but I get in trouble when there's just too much aimless stuff to do, and I can't be sure that I've got everything that was in that area. And that is... I know people who have watched our show enough time know that I bounced off Breath of the Wild for that reason, because I had spent...
It's hard.
Multiple entire days, 40 hours, something like that, on the starting island, and I still know that I missed stuff, and I was just like, I know there's more here, but it takes a really long time in between when I actually find anything interesting, and I'm just kind of bored, but I also am not satisfied that I have everything.
Yeah, well, that, by the way, I broke that for myself. I used to be the same way, Mark. You gotta give you the 10 easy ways to break that habit, because I used to be a completionist too, want to do everything, and I'm just like, screw it. You know what? I won't ever remember not completing something, so I give up, and now I'm fine. I'm having a much better life now. I don't do that, but I will say that, and he said, "Oh, I wish that Baldur's Gate was like Elden Ring and that we were playing D&D in Elden Ring." And I'm like, you're 100% right. This is not that game. It's like, and he was angry. It's like, yeah, but I wish it was. I'm like, that's fair, but it's not that game. Like, this is a linear RPG, very much so, even to the point that if you try to finish Act 1 without finishing the main quests, it tells you, don't do it. It actually says, are you sure you want to go to Act 2? Like, if you go to Act 2, you're going to be underpowered.
You can.
You can. but it warns you, tells you don't do it. It actually wants you to do it in order. I'm like, that's a different game. Like these games are not. An open world is very different. I can do one on open worlds because open worlds have a very different criteria. And I'd say I wouldn't say either one's easier. I'd say it's strangely open worlds are a little easier to do, but and just so you give an idea, my favorite open worlds, my favorite open world games. It's not going to be like Skyrim. I know everyone loves Skyrim. I actually bounced off Skyrim for various reasons because Skyrim has a lot of mini stories, and I don't like that. Definitely Horizon Zero Dawn, and Horizon, whatever the newest one is. That's one of my absolute favorites of all time. Grand Theft Auto 5. I can go into pretty much anything Rockstar does. Rockstars are the super duper masters of open world. Red Dead Redemption 1, even more than 2, believe it or not, is just a masterpiece. They're really good. Obviously, the Zelda games, obviously Elden Ring, but we can go into that some other time. Because we actually probably can, because you know what? Starfield comes out in a few weeks, and that's an open-ended world, and I'm going to play that one too. And I presume, I don't know if it's going to be good or not. I actually don't know. They did have an extra year to polish it, and
it's always good when they give them enough time to polish instead of just making them release it just as fast as possible.
Yes, I'm gonna be very interested. But what I am gonna do is I will play that, and maybe in a month we'll revisit it and we'll do the open world one, Mark, because I'm going to definitely spend time on that. And then
I enjoy this where you, I think it gives us a good back and forth where you're more in depth on what you've seen in the video game, and then I'm relating it back to tabletop RPGs and how you can apply the technique as a GM.
Yeah, because as much as I love RPGs, and everyone who watches this channel knows, like, my first love is video games, like way more than pretty much any other hobby. Way more than board games, way more than, even movies and TV. Video games is my first love, and that's what I spend all my free time. If I had a choice between seeing, in fact, I did. Yesterday, Tuesday, I could have gone play board games. I could have seen a movie.
You played Baldur's Gate 3.
I played Baldur's Gate 3 instead, because that's what I wanted. I'd rather do that, because that's what I want to do. So, and to be honest, this is also, I used to be in the video game industry. To be honest, I left because it was it's really hard, and as hard as making computer software and websites and other things are. Video games are 1,000 times harder. And I sort of gave up on them. I did a couple, and then I was like, I'm out. I'm done. It's too tough. It was so freaking hard. Someone ask a question, and then we'll go. Steven, will you release your Jewel of the Indigo Isles CRPG? Well, we're getting a lot of Indigo Isles back matter. In fact, when you get the world that battles you, Indigo Isles, you will have hundreds of pages to populate Indigo Isles. Mark and I were already talking about the future of the world of Alucard, which is the world that battles you, and we might just spend time. I mean, we're like, oh, we can start looking at other areas. It's like we might end up here forever at this point. It's like one area, and it's just like you can go in and just keep digging down forever, and it's
There's
just like
so much.
Yeah.
And when we add these backer islands, they're so cool.
I know, there's
interesting
so much.
So far. They add more elements to it, and in some ways, having one area that's really fleshed out, that's also an island chain, so you can add it to whatever world you want, makes it versatile and easy to use for people who are running Golarion or Alucard or whatever other setting. Whereas if we build the world out too much, it's only useful for Alucard people. So weirdly, it's interesting in different ways. Also, it looks like Byron Heads in chat says, when are we getting a Mark to GM and actual play? I mean, it just depends. We talk all the time about the fact that I could run some other weird, one of the systems we talked about, or some other weird game that isn't even a tabletop RPG, or whatever you want. We can eventually do it. We'll just have to figure out the logistics. Maybe when we're not buried under Kickstarters and other projects.
Well, that'll be never.
Never.
I mean, never.
Yeah, you're probably right. But I could run Indigo Isles. Like, there's a lot of options out there.
By the way, and I'm hearing this, I actually just went to Gen Con, and the number one thing, I went to some Kickstarter, talks, and the number one thing that came up, because ML just said, Sally, you have to pay £40 for shipping the books. The number one complaint is shipping, and we have nothing to do with it. I can't do anything about the shipping. The shipping is not me. And we even have that's even good rates. For various very real world reasons, especially overseas, they're making it very, very difficult there's two things, and then we're going to wrap this up, is that one, they put in all these penalties for the pandemic, and they added a ton of fees to the shipping, and none of them were removed. There was before the pandemic, shipping was fine. It was a little expensive, but it was fine. After the pandemic, it's gotten out of control. The other thing is a lot of European countries and Canada and other countries are putting in specific laws to make it very difficult for you to ship outside of either the EU or their country, so that if you're going from the United States to the EU, it's incredibly expensive. Heck, if you're just going from the United States to Canada, it's incredibly expensive. Because they want to keep, it makes sense, they're trying to keep everything in the country, and so they're trying to keep businesses and companies within their own country in business. So they're making it very expensive for outside people to ship, and then they keep the businesses within the country. It's reasonable, and that totally makes sense. But it's also a real, unfortunately, we live in a world that is worldwide now, and shipping can go anywhere in the world. And 10 years ago, this really wasn't an issue. It was a little expensive to go to Europe, a little expensive to go to these countries, but ever since the pandemic, it's kind of gotten out of control, and it stinks. We're doing what we can to try to help with that. And by the way, one of the tricks is, sometimes you'll see these Kickstarter for board games. And the board games, what they'll do is the shipping will only be like $20-30. And I'm like, how is that possible? I talked to them, and they said, oh, because we eat it. they completely eat the shipping. They're getting destroyed on shipping. Because these
Are
board
they
games,
losing money, or are they just charging an arm and a leg for the game?
neither. They'd rather get the game out, because then once it's out, they can get into the big box stores. And
so they are kind of maybe losing on.
No, they're losing. Yeah, they're definitely they're eating it. Yeah,
it's the first one, and then they get into the big box stores and make money there.
Yeah, they lose a lot.
That's got to be scary, though. You have to have a lot of confidence in your game to be willing to lose a ton of money on a big Kickstarter.
Well, I was about to say that's going away, because I just backed a Kickstarter, and my shipping in the United States, and by the way, shipping the United States to the United States is not that expensive, was $40. I don't think I've ever paid $40 for, and it wasn't that big a game. And I'm like, well, I guess those days are over. And in fact, in the backer kit, or sorry, in the Kickstarter, I saw comments are like, wait a second, why is shipping so much? Why is shipping so much? Because shipping in the United States is usually like 10, maybe 15, $20. And this is not a lot. I'm not getting a 500-pound. We're talking about I got the lowest tier, and it was $40. And I saw people arguing that some of these were like 70, 80, $90. And I'm like, damn, I guess they're not eating those shipping costs anymore, at least for this one game. And I'm like, yeah, I mean, shipping is getting out of control, which, all right, you have customs, you have VAT. I mean, it's just, you know what, because they are losing out. I won't get into it. I can go into this for hours. It's just a very complex system. This is better with Baron. Baron and I could talk about this for hours, but
Baron would be able to talk about the geopolitics.
We could talk about this for hours.
He had some rabbit holes about some of the shipping in D&D that he said would lead to potentially lead to a drug cartel.
We talked about it. I disagreed with him.
Wow.
No, he and I talked about it at Gen Con. We'll bring him on and talk about it. It was
a very weird number of dominoes. Obviously, it was not directly connected. It was this domino hits this domino, hits this domino, hits this domino, which hits the drug cartel.
Yeah, it starts going into kidnapping and drug cartels. And I said, you know what? he's not wrong, but there's actually history of what he described because he's younger than us. And I said this has happened before, and this is how they countered it, and he didn't know that. So
Wow.
we'll have him on the show because this is not the first time what he explained was going to happen. But very long story short is this is only accelerating online content and video games and things like this because I don't have to pay shipping, and the shipping is not. I have nothing to do with the shipping. I wish I could magically get all my books to you, and even if I have the books in Europe, or in like Australia, it's still very expensive. Like you're only saving a couple of dollars at most, and the cost
Yikes.
for me to get them there is so much. It's not worth it. It's the countries have to decide if they want to either accelerate their own demise and making shipping so expensive that no one does it, or they just grin and bear it and realize like, look, we live in a worldwide economy now, and either deal with it and figure out some other way, or everyone's just going to go digital, and it's just not going to work. So anyhow,
All right.
yeah, sorry about that,
Well,
everyone.
thanks for joining us, everyone, and I hope you enjoyed these tips. I had a lot of fun describing the way to apply the tips to your game. And join us next week. Do you think we'll have on the guest?
Yeah. We're gonna have him on.
Questing Beast.
Yeah, we're gonna have Questing Beast on definitely next week.
Awesome.
I didn't hear from him until very late. He was supposed to be on this week, but then I didn't hear from him, and I kind of want to talk about this.
This is an awesome topic, anyway.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about this anyhow because it was timely, and quite frankly, I'm far enough in the game that I could see how they did it, and I feel like a lot of people. We did this before. Anything I like, script writing, video games, more video games. I like to see analyze why they succeed and how you can use those successes for your role-playing games.
Yeah,
I like
me
to do
too.
that.
That's a big thing for me. As a game designer, I love reading like the rules for games, even when my friends say, "Don't read it. These rules are so bad at explaining it. Just let me explain it. I know how it works." I'm like, no, now I want to read it more. I want to know why it failed.
Got it.
To explain things to you. So absolutely.
All right, everyone. Well, check out battlezoo.com, check out all of our cool stuff, and we will be talking to you later.
Bye.